The Loss. Chapter 45. The windows and doors of our house were always open, and I remember the dampness in the air that day in July after several days of steady rain. No strong winds, only rain, coming down in sheets, forming puddles and polishing off the dark green leaves of the giant tiger lilies that grew inside the hedge along the front of the house. That afternoon I encountered Dr. Udham Singh, the railway doctor, in the living room. He had just walked in through the open door, dripping water droplets off his umbrella, which he still held fully open above his head. He asked me if my father was home, and I said yes, he was, and ran upstairs to get him. It was only many years later that I heard about the superstition that it was bad luck to open umbrellas indoors. At that moment, I had been mainly concerned about the water dripping from the ribbed tips of his umbrella onto the living room floor. That Ramadan, the monsoons had started, and the little troop of orphan boys rose in the dark hours before dawn and trudged from the mosque up and down the streets of the town. The wet tarmac reflected the light from their lanterns as they sang Sehri ki raat jago jago to the tune of Indian film songs. Fasting was always an exciting affair for us. The challenge of going from pre-dawn to dusk without any food or water was something we children imposed on ourselves. It was not compulsory in Islam for those before puberty, nor was it mandatory for those who were ill. But we fasted, even though we didn't understand the spiritual aspects of what we were doing. We insisted on being woken up in the middle of the night for Sehri, that period prior to dawn when one was allowed to partake of food or water before fasting for the entire day. If we hadn't been woken up, we were disappointed, because though as children we didn't fast every day, on the days we did, we felt and were treated as special. There were delicious foods which we ate at Maghrib, sunset, after breaking the fast with a date and drinking milk that was sweetened with pink rose water syrup. Not understanding the full significance of the fast, my younger brother Farooq and I would stand on the concrete platform at the corner of the house, from where we had an excellent view of the mosque, and watch as the Maulvi climbed the stairs to the minaret. As he raised his hands towards his ears in preparation for giving the azan, we would be holding a tasty morsel up to our open mouths, ready to pop it in the instant we heard the first word of the call for prayer through the loudspeaker. It was the last day of Ramadan that year, and we were excitedly looking forward to wearing the pretty dresses which our mother had stitched for us to wear on Eid. For some reason, I remember the beautiful pale yellow georgette dress she had stitched for my sister Dolly, Rihanna, and have only a vague recollection of the two dresses she stitched for me, one of which was white with tiny orange and blue flowers. We had completed our sehri and had gone upstairs to wash and pray before going back to sleep. It must have been about 3 o'clock in the morning, and my father had just finished wudu, the ablutions before morning prayers, when he sat down ashen-faced in the armchair while we children hung around him, concerned and confused. My mother ran to him, helped him into their bedroom, and got him to lie down on the bed, while my sister Rihanna, Dolly, without pausing to put on her shoes, ran barefoot up the hill to fetch Dr. Paul. She ran fast, her heart thudding, partly because of the exertion, but mostly with anxiety about Papaji. She came racing back while Dr. Paul got ready to come. At the time, Dr. Paul was the only doctor in Kalor other than the civil surgeon who was stationed at the hospital, which was further away, so Dolly took the quickest route she could get help. By the time the doctor arrived, Papaji had lapsed into unconsciousness. The entire house went silent, poised as if waiting for the lights to turn back on. The next day was Eid, the end of the fasting and a day to celebrate. We didn't put on our pretty new clothes. Then Papaji regained consciousness, and we happily came by his bed, where he spoke softly to us, and we diligently kept trying to memorize the prayers. We wandered quietly into his room, climbed onto his bed, and sat there next to him, reading, repeating the prayers, trying to memorize them from the book he had brought us only a couple of months before. They were prayers written in Roman Arabic with an English translation, special prayers, prayers to heal the sick. I had always associated the recitation of verses from the Quran with comfort ever since I was a little girl, and would sit on his lap learning Arabic prayers, especially when I was hurt or upset, generally because I'd been bullied or fallen and bruised my knees. The scraped knees which would bleed and bleed again, because with the scabs barely healing, I would pick at them and watch the tiny pinpricks of blood seep through the newly formed shiny pink skin. We fell asleep that night, assured that he was better now, and then when it was nearly dawn, I woke up suddenly and found out somehow that he had passed away, and that it was time for us to read the second set of prayers on the same page, prayers for the dead. In the semi-light of morning, I awoke to the sound of my mother's voice, dry-throated. "What have you done?" to the civil surgeon, who had moments before given my father an injection. Somehow I knew, and woke my younger brother, Farouk. "Daddy's dead," I said in a hushed whisper. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, July 29th, 1949. The date is etched in my memory, deeply engraved, like the deep grooves I etched into the lime-washed parapet of the veranda in front of the house. 10, my age. I wanted somehow to commemorate the number of years I had been fortunate enough to know him as my father. I felt a sense of urgency that events were rapidly unfolding, but I felt no sadness, had no conscious awareness of the drastic turn my life would take, that everything would change, and it changed. How do I describe this person? Who was not a person to me, but a presence, a security, a source of comfort. I knew him as big and strong, handsome, kind and loving, without really thinking these things. How do you express in words intangible emotions and connections? What defense mechanisms worked so that I didn't cry? I didn't recognize the loss. It wasn't till I was in my mid-teens that I shed my first tears, and the realization of my loss struck me. Today I cry more freely when I remember, as I do now. I ran out into the garden with Rihanna and gathered dahlias, bright red, maroon, yellow and pink blossoms. It was the season for dahlias, the rainy season, and it had rained. I remember the water droplets, silver on the deep red petals of the huge flowers. My mother had the juicy, fibrous, bulging clusters of their bulbs planted just that year. There were also gladioli, giant red ones, like large orchids, and yellow ones with red spots that we called tiger lilies. They stood oblivious, in rows at the end of the yard, on the right-hand side where the old garage had once stood. We didn't pick the lilies or the gladioli, only the dahlias, armfuls of dahlias. We gathered them and took them into the house, and ran out to collect more from neighbors' yards. I don't remember asking, and no one stopped us. It was as if we had an unspoken grief license of some kind. I have never been able to look at a dahlia since then without a vivid flashback to that day. The sun had risen over the child's drawing of hills across the small floodplain of the Kalor stream, the same stream where my father and other dignitaries of the town had somberly sprinkled Mahatma Gandhi's ashes not long before. More flowers arrived as people came by to pay their respects, and Mr. Silcox, who taught physical education and music at Kingswood School, had arrived. He sat in the living room, looking sad and nervous in the upright, cane-backed chair with the dark polished teak frame. Rehanna and I smiled at him congenially as we came into the room. He had never visited us before, yet we were not surprised to see him. All the mommies, the Kalas with sad faces and tears in their eyes, and Hussein Jan Kala getting together the camphor balls for the coffin and the sour smell of death in the room. And I was detached from the reality of what had occurred. Some mechanism that disallowed the significance of my loss. They carried Papaji through the hallway and down the stairs, and my mother, following, suddenly collapsed on the steps and fainted. There were many flowers, especially dahlias of every color, giant ones and small ones. His coffin was carried to the cemetery in Sherbasti, and we followed, but didn't enter. We girls and women sat on the grass on the other side of the small bridge that spanned a small creek and looked on at the hillside where many of our relatives already lay under the pines. My mother sat with us, distraught with an unbearable pain. All around the graves, the tall grasses with feathery wings shimmered a soft purple in the sunlight. My cousin Anne and I had biked there earlier in the year, and at the grave of her mother, Anne had taken a small piece from a blade of grass and placed it gently in a little glass bottle, sealed the cap, and taken it home.